Hey guys, how's it going? Jam here, and welcome to another track build battle. As you can see on screen, I'm staring at a car that I've already used. I just figured I'd put the Aston Martin here as a bit of a screensaver for the time being, this being the car that set the benchmark the very first time in this series. And the reason I've got this on screen is because I can't show you what car I'm going to use yet today, because I don't know what it is. I'll elaborate further in just a second, but I've got to quickly say another thank you to Mr. Zach, who suggested that I do this for a video in one of these episodes. I don't have a comment to put on the screen because he just told me to do it rather than actually commenting. But yes, Zach, thank you for another suggestion. Keep them coming anymore, and you'll have to be a friend of the show, I think. But anyway, to get the cars for today's episodes, I'm going to be doing something I've not really done on this game so far. I'm going to be opening some loot crates. 2 to be precise, provided that I do get a car in 2. I think it's a guaranteed car. I don't know exactly what mod crate I'm going to get yet. I think just because I'm cheap, I might go for this one, the mixed crate basic. Car, driver gear, mods and badges guaranteed. The way they've phrased that, I don't know if it's just the badges that are guaranteed, or whether it's all guaranteed. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, I'm going to open one and find out, so let's see what we get for the first car. As I'm doing this slightly differently, the format of this episode may be slightly different as well, because after recording this intro as a live reaction bit, I've then got to go away and build the car and then do the laps and then come back to it later as a post-com, so it's going to a little bit more work from me, not much more than usual. But yeah, if the format's slightly different, that's why. Let's open this crate and see if we do indeed get a guaranteed car, and if we do, what it is. Nope, that's a badge. Nope. Nope. Yes! We got a car at least. But it's a Renault Clio RS. I've got nothing against the Clio RS. I'm led to believe that that is a very good car in the hot hatch homologation lobber. I keep saying lobber. It's a lobby hopper lobby, something like that. So yeah, that's going to be the first car. I think what I'm going to do is, instead of finding out the second car straight away, I'm going to go and do the laps in this car and then come back and get the second car after I've done that, and then we'll jump back to the comparison right at the end of the episode, as always. So yeah, let's go and get this Renault. And I'll stay live for just a little bit longer and have a see at what we've got to play with. So the reason I kind of winced when I saw this car is because of the rules of this series. It's going to have to be swapped to rear-wheel drive. And yeah, it's not exactly the most promising car to be rear-wheel drive. So anyway, I'm going to get this done. I'm going to stop waffling. I'll catch up with you in just a second in your time, but it'll probably take me quite a while to get there. But nonetheless, I shall see you very shortly. So let's go and take a look at how this Renault Clio fared. Now, you may have been able to tell from my initial reaction when I got this car out of the crate that I wasn't really expecting much, and I wasn't really looking forward to it either. It's kind of perhaps a potentially unfair stereotype that swapping front-engined front-wheel drive cars to, well, not that there's any other front-wheel drive cars with engine in different positions, I don't think, but in general, swapping from front-wheel drive to rear-wheel drive isn't a very good idea, especially in a car with a short wheelbase such as the Clio, and especially if you're going from rather low PI to a rather high PI, as I've jumped this car up, I think from mid-D class all the way to the top of A. However, that didn't mean that this was a lost cause. You know, I'm still going to give it a fair shot, and I'll tell you about how it drove and how the stats handled up, and then we'll see if it actually managed to post a competitive time later on in the video. I know I've waffled a little bit, so we're not really starting out with it, but I am going to, as always, take a look at and see how this car compares on paper. Obviously, I haven't got anything to compare it to yet. I still haven't opened my second loot crate, so I don't know what we're going up against. So I'll just have to base it on sort of the average of the cars in this series. You've got 6.2 speed. I don't know really how that compares to most of the cars. That seems to be the stat that fluctuates the most depending on the car. Far more relevant is the fact that this car can reach, I think it's 148, maybe 149 if you get a good run, down this very long main straight that we're going down towards the first corner, which is very much about average. If you're hitting 150, I normally say that's average, but I think I may be overstretching a little bit. If you're doing 150, you're doing quite well. So to be only just below that, that's really not bad going. Handling stat is 5.8. I think that's pretty average. I think we've had, I was going to say maybe slightly on the higher side of average, but I think we've had cars that are going over 6 handling, so it doesn't stand out to me particularly. The handling stat, perhaps not particularly necessary. Help me, I've lost words. But perhaps the handling stat isn't particularly representative of how I felt on track. I'm trying to link it in quickly with me making a mistake there and ending up in the gravel on the outside of the Degners. The one stat that did impress me in this car was 8.5 acceleration. I was about to say I think that was actually quite high for this series, but I'm not convinced that it is. I think... Oh, excuse me, a bit of hiccup there. I think it might again be around average, maybe a little bit above average. I'm pretty sure it's one of the better accelerating cars. That's how it felt anyway. But say, feel is not always, again, particularly accurate. And then 5.9 braking, which along with the handling, I think is about average in this series. I think we've seen from about 5.6 to about 6.2, if I'm not mistaken. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's not an extremity car. It's going to be a sort of all-rounder compared to what we've already seen. On crikey, we've gone 3 minutes already. Didn't realise that. I'll try and wrap this up quickly. It's bad. I want to keep waffling on. In terms of the vital statistics of the car, we got exactly 400 horsepower from the stock engine without any aspiration changes, which I was quite happy to see. I was almost convinced that this was going to be the first car to have an engine swap, if not just a aspiration swap. Only just under 300 foot-pounds of torque though, so it's not a very torquey engine. But then again, it only weighs under 2,600 pounds, so I think it is one of the lightest cars we've had. Maybe the Silvias were a bit lighter. I think the one that's leading was actually a bit lighter than that, but yeah, still a very light car compared to some of the cars we've had. And it's running 245 tyres on both front and the rear. Now, I think I'm going to go for one more lap, because I do want to talk about how this car drove. To start off with, it was very much how I expected it when I was talking about how bad I was feeling about jumping in this car. It had all the typical issues. It was quite twitchy at low speed and wheel spinny. Wheel spinny. I think I might have just invented a new word. But yeah, there was quite a lot of wheel spin when you're trying to exit tight apexes. And because you're changing the complete balance of the car, through the longer corners it just felt unstable and it would just sort of understeer you wide. So there was certainly a lot of issues. The only place it didn't seem to initially feel bad was through this first corner at 130R. Even kicking out a bit of sideways action there over the curb, it was relatively composed, and when I got it right in the first few laps, it felt lovely. The thing is though, what really surprised me about this car is I found it very easy to very quickly adapt my driving style to how this car needed to be driven. My driving style is very much based on the premise of slow in, fast out, which means having a later turn in and getting on the power very early. With a short wheelbase and a snappy rear end, you couldn't do that in this car. You needed to really attack the apex with probably carrying more corner speed, but then almost scrubbing off speed on the apex, meaning that you're actually going slower, but because of the gearing being quite long in this car, it means you could actually get on full power quicker, even though you use it at a lower rev range, without spinning the tyres up. It's not a flawless principle. Once again, I'm going to have a mistake on the screen there as I run into the wall. But yeah, I did just want to quickly wrap up with saying that this car definitely had its problems, especially when I first jumped in it. But don't rule it out. It was actually surprisingly decent once I had learned how to drive it. Now, I've been waffling on for about a lap longer than I normally do in these episodes for a single car. So I'm going to cut it off here, hope the video isn't going to be too long in total, and let's go and find out what this Renault is going to be up against. Okay, so here I am back in the main menu, and now that the Clio has had its moment in the spotlight and completed all the laps that it needs to complete today, let's go and find out what's going to be going up against it in this episode. And that, of course, means buying another crate. It was that one that before, wasn't it? Mixed crate basic. I'm tempted to spend a little bit extra money and go for a better one. But to be honest, I don't really care for crates at all, so that's why I was being really cheap and buying the cheapest one before. Tempted to go for a better one. I'll stop waffling. This video's going to be long enough already. Let's just go for the same one again. See what we get. Open the crate. Come on. Yes, I said open the crate. There we go. We will wait for the animation though, because there's an animation and it's suspenseful. Oh god, not using that. Nor that. Oh. Great. We've got another front-wheel drive car to swap to rear-wheel drive. Fantastic. And I already own the car as well. Just noticed that. Okay. Okay. This game is not being particularly kind to me today. Let's go and find the Dodge. I've overshot slightly. Come on. Come on. Don't be slow. Come on, menus. There we go. There we go. Two of the buggers. Oh, we got a black one or a gold one. Oh, why do I... Yeah, I don't like it. Don't need two. Bugger off. Wow, 19,000. That was worth spending 70 grand on a crate, wasn't it? Right, okay. My prejudice against the Renault perhaps wasn't completely justified for the first part of the episode. So, let's hope this Dodge can try and prove me wrong as well. I'll see you back on track. So now we move into the analysis section of the second underwhelming car in this episode. That's what I get for being cheap and buying literally the least expensive crate available. This Dodge, however, I just can't quite seem to put my words together about this car at the moment, because there's so many things I want to say about it that all seem quite conflicting. It was... sort of linking off the fact that it's kind of underwhelming, because I've got two rather... I'm hesitant to say boring, but I think underwhelming for the two cars. When you're buying a crate, you could theoretically get pretty much anything. Like, it doesn't have to be a high rarity level to be interesting, and I'm just not thrilled by these two cars particularly. The Clio, I guess, was a little, it's new, little hot hatch. Something we haven't really seen before in this series, apart from the Mercedes 845, but... I'm not going to lie, I was hoping for something like a low-level muscle car. I know there's plenty of them in the low levels, but anyway, this is what we've got to deal with. So let's stack up the Dodge against the Clio, and of course on paper coming up first as always. Top speed stat is a mere 5.9 to the Clio's 6.2, but again that stat seems to be pretty darn irrelevant because it was doing pretty much identical top speed into turn 1, hitting 148, 149 miles an hour. If anything, I think this car was perhaps hitting 149 a little bit more consistently. With the Clio, you needed a good run and a really late sort of brake and turn in order to get that extra mile an hour. The Dodge seemed to get it a little bit more consistently. And that kind of links into everything I'm going to say in the next few stats. It's 5.7 handling to the Clio's 5.8, but again, I would say that the Dodge felt... I wouldn't say it was better to drive, but it just felt a bit more stable, a bit more almost normal, like as if this car came rear-wheel drive. It's again a bit more consistent, and you're going to be hearing the word consistent quite a lot. Acceleration for the two cars identical at 8.5, and the Dodge is again 0.1 down on braking, same as it is for handling. Those two seem to go hand in hand a lot of the time. Other stats to mention, the power. It's got 364 horsepower, which is 35 down on the Clio, but it's got 371 foot-pounds of torque, which is nearly 80 up on the Clio, so less powerful but more torquey. It's also had a lot shorter gears, this car. That's something I'm noticing when I'm not doing any tuning. The gearing ratios seem to sort of vary massively. depending on whether you've swapped it or what gearbox you put in it. Sometimes I go for the race gearbox, sometimes I don't. I went for the race gearbox in the Clio and got long gears. I didn't go for the race gearbox in the Dodge, but I got quite short gears. But then when you drivetrain swap it, you get a sport gearbox anyway, so who knows how that works. The weight of this car, again, probably contributed to how sort of consistent it was. It was sort of 250 pounds heavier than the Renault, weighing at just over 2,800 pounds, which is pretty sort of average sort of weight for my sort of building car. So, I mean, if you're looking at just the body shell, this car was both perhaps a little bit more suited to a rear-wheel drive swap, but at the same time a little bit less suited. It's quite a bit older than the Renault. I think the Renault's 2010, this is only 2003, so and the Renault being an RS model, you expect to have a pretty good chassis underneath it already, but it's kind of really built around that front-wheel drive mantra. It's got a good chassis for front-wheel drive. This car might not be quite so optimised sort of stock, but it's a slightly longer wheelbase, which definitely helps it out when you do swap it to rear-wheel drive. And the last thing I'm going to say, which is going to help the Dodge's consistency, is the bigger tyres. It's only one stage. The Clio had two 4.5s all round. The Dodge's got two 5.5s all round. But again, it's just that little things like that I am really starting to notice in this series. And the Dodge was just consistently a little bit more consistent. As I say, I think the best thing I can say about this car is something I've already said. It almost felt like it was rear-wheel drive from stock. Didn't feel like it was a good rear-wheel drive car from stock, but it felt rear-wheel drive from stock nonetheless. So it's really tricky to explain. I'm finding this a lot lately. Well, not lately in this series. These episodes seem to be quite few and far between. But whenever I do this series, I sort of know how I feel about the car, but actually externalising that and putting it into a descriptive analysis is really rather tricky. The Renault was on edge a lot of the time, and it was really hard to extract the speed out of it. But when you got that speed, it was pretty darn quick, or at least it felt it compared to when you were struggling around. In this car, it was a lot more consistent, a lot more composed, so I was doing a lot of lap times that was in about 2/10 of the best that I was doing. So it was, I'd say, far, far more consistent than the Renault. And the Renault was having issues here, there, and everywhere. Like sometimes it was understeer, sometimes it was snappy oversteer. This car was only struggling at one thing, and that was traction. And that was only in the real traction zones, like out the tight hairpin we saw a minute ago, and out of like turn 2. Turn 3 actually is the second of the two 90-degree right-handers in the first sector. Again, that's contrary to what I said about it being sort of heavier, less powerful, bigger tyres. You expected to have perhaps more traction, but the much shorter gears I think really played against it. But yeah, I could probably waffle on for a few more laps, but I've just noticed that I've begun over 6 minutes already on this car, so I'll cut it short there, and we'll go and find out how fast this car was compared to the Renault. So now at last we move on to the side-by-side fastest lap comparisons between the Renault Clio and the Dodge SRT-4. Going into turn 1, pretty damn close at this point. We know from my information that I gave you earlier they're reaching about the same speed on the straights, and it looks pretty close around turn 1 as well. The running wide slightly won't help the Dodge, but it did enable it to carry a little bit more speed. It looks like around the very slow exit corners where the Dodge was really struggling to get its power down, the Clio has pulled out a little bit of an advantage, but I would expect the Dodge to sort of claw it back through these sort of middle speed corners at the Lesmos. Maybe I would expect a little bit more than that. It looks like the Clio's a little bit ahead going into the very tricky hairpin. The Clio was really struggling to get slowed down and on the entry to this. There's a very fast right-hander that leads into it. Then on the exit you can see the Dodge on the right-hand side there kicking up loads more tyre smoke, really struggling on the exit. A real contrast between the two cars. Coming into the alternate chicane, it's a very tricky chicane no matter what car you're driving or how it drives. Both have navigated it fairly well though. Coming into quite a high and medium speed end to the lap. Coming into Spoon Corner, we got a very long left-hander. The Clio struggled here a lot in its laps, taking it almost as two separate corners for the apexes. The Dodge being able to be far smoother around the corner. Doesn't look like it's really going to help him though. It's not a him. Dodge really wasn't helped by that though, and in the run to the line it is the Clio that goes fastest in this episode. and by some noticeable margin. So we'll start off with the time from the Dodge, a 1:27.440. Just in the lower half of the table, but it is a very crowded area. You've got the likes of the Skyline, the 22B, the Evo for company around that 27.4, 27.5 area. But we know the Renault was faster. How much is the question? In the shock of the series, or it's not that big of a shock, it's not like it's gone top, but in the definitely the shock of the series so far, the Clio becomes only the 4th car to get under the 1:27 barrier with a 26.942, within a tenth of the HSV that ran in episode 2, and only, well, not even 3/10 of the fastest car in this series. Anyway, this video has been far too long already. I hope you've made it to the end. If you have done, let me know down in the comments. Say, Jam, I made it to the end, and let me know whether you enjoyed it or not as well. But with that, I bid you farewell, and I'll see you for the next one. Goodbye.